What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to another episode where we're covering some of the major headlines currently in the news. Now, the major topic for today is going to be the Save America Act, which has been in hot contest recently between Democrats and Republicans. The different talking points that each side has been having regarding this sort of a measure. So we're going to break down exactly what it is, exactly what's going on, why each side is saying what they're saying, and get to the bottom of the Save America Act. Now, what is it in the first place? Well, this is a measure that would strengthen our election integrity by adding requirements for voter ID, meaning that you would have to provide photo identification in order to vote. Now, what are considered acceptable documents when registering to vote? A real ID, a valid US passport, military ID, as well as state ID. Now, you need one of these acceptable forms of identification as well as a birth certificate or a naturalization certificate. And so, really, what the goal is to prove that you are who you are claiming to be, as well as to ensure that you are a United States citizen. Now, eligibility is in terms of election eligibility, all United States citizens above the age of 18 will be able to vote. All that's required is that you can provide identification. Now, those who will be ineligible to vote will be non-citizens as well as people below the age of 18. And so this was this bill has been put forward to the U.S. House and has passed the House by very slim margins. And it was a vote that came along party lines. Now, there were 217 Republicans who voted in favor of this bill. No Republicans voted against it, though there was one Republican that voted not to vote. In terms of Democrats, there was one Democrat that voted yes. 213 Democrats voted no, with no abstentions. So what is the controversy around this bill? Because it does seem relatively obvious that, to go and vote in an election, you should be able to prove that you are who you're claiming to be. At the very least, to show identification in order to cast a ballot. So where does the controversy really lie within this matter? Well, the folks representing the Republican Party are claiming it to be common sense and a move to reinforce our election security and to build confidence among Americans within election security. Now that they've compared it to other things where you need identification for, air travel, picking up prescription medication, to buy alcohol and tobacco, opening a bank account, and even attending the Democratic National Convention, you need to show photo ID. So the Republicans are taking the route of calling this measure a common sense move, considering the slew of aspects within your day-to-day life where you're required to present a photo identification in order to proceed with whatever it is that you're doing. So that's the route the Republicans have taken, is the common sense route. However, the Democrats claim that millions of Americans would be disenfranchised from the voting process, comparing it to things like Jim Crow 2.0, words directly from the mouth of Chuck Schumer, comparing this to Jim Crow. They've been claiming that women will lose their voting rights. They also claim that this is the nationalization of the election process. However, the Democrats have received a little bit of backlash for some of these comments. When comparing it to Jim Crow, the disenfranchisement of black voters, black people will be equally eligible to vote in elections if this bill passes as anyone else would be, because it's not a different set of requirements from different people. All that's being asked is to present photo identification. And same thing when it comes to women. Women will be equally eligible to vote as anyone else. Again, all that's being asked is photo ID. And in terms of nationalizing elections, states will still be conducting their own election. However, this is a measure to prevent there from being any sort of fraudulence within that process. Now, the states certainly do not have the right to incorporate fraud into their elections. However, they're certainly entitled to facilitate individual elections state by state, which is, of course, something that they will be able to continue doing and is not something that would be in any way popular among either party, would be the nationalization of elections. Now, preventing fraud is certainly not the nationalization of an election, though that's what the Democrats are claiming it to be. There has been polling on the issue, polling done to gauge public opinion among everyday Americans to see where they stand on this topic. There's about 83% of Americans support voter ID, the requirement for photo identification to cast a ballot. Um, Within that 83%, you've got 95% support from Republican voters and 71% support from Democratic voters. Furthermore, 85% of white voters support this measure, 82% of Hispanic voters support this measure, and 76% of black voters support this measure. So you can see that this is something with widespread support, more support than really just about anything else that it seems contentious in the American body politic. This is one of the most um, supported steps to take when it comes to dealing with election security. Because again, no matter how you break it down, this is something that is incredibly popular among everyday Americans. So digging a little bit deeper, are there any ulterior motives that there may be in terms of why the different parties are supporting what they are? Well, it comes down to voter fraud. Now, the Republicans are disproportionately affected by voter fraud, whereas the Democrats are disproportionately benefiting from voter fraud. Well, how is that the case? Well, let's break it down by numbers. Now, there's been a handful of studies done on specifically this issue when it comes to non-US citizens voting in elections. Because again, that would be the criteria of people who are ineligible to vote are non-US citizens. And between 2008 and 2012, Harvard YouGov had done a few studies in 2008, 2010, and then in 2012. And some of their findings conclude that there's about, so in their 2008 study, they found 15% of non-citizens claim that they're registered to vote, with an additional 12% of non-citizens who claim that they're not registered to vote, though appear within registered voters. So that comes to about 27% of non-citizens registered to vote as of 2008, with an additional 8% of non-citizens who claim to have voted. Then their 2010 study shows 16% of non-citizens claim that they're registered, with an additional 14% who claim that they're not registered but then appear within voter rolls. And then in that 2010 study, they show about 3.5% of non-citizens claim to have voted. Then their 2012 study shows about 14% of non-citizens claim to be registered, with an additional 8% who claim that they're not registered but then appear within registration, with 11% of non-citizens claiming to have voted. And they land on the number of, well, really, it's a range anywhere from 1.2 million to 3.6 million non-citizens are casting ballots in elections. They also find that about 81.8% of non-citizens are voting for the Democratic candidate in presidential elections. So this draws the number that anywhere from 981,000 to 2.95 million non-citizens are voting for the Democratic candidate in presidential elections. And this draws us to our final conclusion that anywhere from 1.3 to 3.9% of Democrat voters are non-citizens. So the Democrats are getting anywhere from, 1 to 4% of their entire voting base is ineligible to vote. And so that's why you see such a strong push from the Democratic Party against these requirements to prove that you're a citizen of this country in order to vote, is because they're getting, anywhere from 1.2 to 3.6 million votes that are ineligible. Nearly 4% of their entire voting base isn't allowed to vote, but they're still accepting those ballots. So you would see a major swing in the outcome of presidential elections out into the future if non-citizens are being prevented from voting, if this step is taken to ensure our election security. Now, again, because this is something that's incredibly popular among Americans, among US citizens, is to take these very basic steps to ensure that people are who they say that they are in order to vote. So there you have it. You can see exactly why one party is saying one thing, the other party is saying the other, because you have a party that's clearly being protected with fraud. They're receiving huge amounts of support from ineligible voters. And that's just something you cannot have in what's considered to be a functioning democracy, to just have, widespread fraud like that. And of course, these studies were from 2008 to 2012, so those numbers could be a little bit different now. But considering how, especially the 2020 election was ran, just in terms of certain abnormalities that occurred within that election, I could see this number being much higher today than it was then. Because, in those elections, when you have Barack Obama on the ballot, and Obama was very firm against illegal immigration, whereas the current Democratic Party is not taking that same stance. Where now they're much more prone to support the enfranchisement of non-US citizens. And so considering that being the case, these numbers could actually be much higher. You could have, maybe upwards of 5% of all Democratic Party voters in presidential elections are not eligible to vote. And considering that, estimates show anywhere from 10 to 20 million non-citizens are here illegally in the US, if the Democratic Party gets what they want, they're going to have an additional, 10, 15 million voters. And by what measure? By accepting illegal votes. And so just a basic measure to prevent non-citizens from voting would then subtract 4% of their total voting base in presidential elections. And just the fact that that's the case is mind-blowing. Like how can this continue? It's just such a major problem in our election system, and you have Democrats fighting tooth and nail to prevent something that's maintaining widespread popularity among Americans, something that's just seen as so common sense, something that's being done in every democracy around the world. And you land on the same conclusion. The reason that they're taking this position is to protect the fraud that's occurring in our elections. But with all that being said, we're going to wrap it up here. It was very much a pleasure getting to talk to you about this very important issue. I'm sure you're going to be hearing a lot more about this in the news. And so now that you have a few more numbers by your side, you can be a little more prepared when it comes to the discussions you may be having and to just have more insight into the issue. So I thank you for tuning in. Again, it was a pleasure talking to you. My name is Brett Cody Fornatoro. I will see you in the next episode.